What is going on, my friends out there? My name is Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel. And once again, this guy, Dracula, just straight up doesn't get the hint. He just keeps coming back again and again, and we have to keep knocking him down again and again. So here's what we're gonna do. In order to smack him up a few times, we're gonna take a look at a classic game on the Super Nintendo. Now, I know a lot of you have been wanting me to review this game for quite a while, so let's just dive right into this. This is Super Castlevania IV for the Super Nintendo. Super Castlevania IV is the first mainline Castlevania game released for the Super Nintendo. The game came out in 1991, about a year after the previous Castlevania game for the NES. Jumping into the 16-bit era, Super Castlevania IV isn't really a sequel, but a remake to the original Castlevania game. While this might seem like an odd choice for the fourth game in a series, it did however make a cool impression on everyone by giving Simon Belmont a cool 16-bit makeover. Story-wise, the game follows the same beats as the original Castlevania, so there's nothing new here that you probably don't already know. Simon Belmont is out to destroy Dracula and save his home from evil. About enough said. But does this reinterpretation of the original game hit all the right notes with games on the Super Nintendo? And did it do anything better for the fans of the series? The answer is yes, but not in every way. Now, this jump into the 16-bit realm for the Castlevania series is pretty damn good. I really like the design of Simon Belmont. I think he looks great on screen. I really love the colors and just the overall reimagining of a lot of the classic elements from Castlevania on the NES. I think also the sound design for the game is pretty damn good too, which we'll talk about the music a little bit later, but most of the sound effects, including the one for Simon's whip, I think is really well done. It has a very distinctive sound that you can't really associate with anything else but Simon Belmont's whip. Now, admittedly so, there is a couple elements here and there within the backgrounds and some of the way that certain the colors, kind of blend in together in certain stages. I feel like those kind of bleed into each other a little bit too much. It could be a little bit tough to see certain enemies as you're traversing all the stages. That could get a little bit annoying, but for the most part, this is a really cool reimagining of Castlevania. It's very interesting looking at this game now as opposed to when we looked at Castlevania Chronicles, which felt more like a linear remake of the first Castlevania game. It's just so interesting seeing these two different styles of a remake and a reimagining for the exact same game. While Castlevania Chronicles felt like it took a little bit more of a direct approach, like just repainting and imagining certain elements, but still essentially keeping the same game as is, Super Castlevania IV does a little bit more with this. It not only gives us all the elements and the different types of familiar characteristics of the original Castlevania game, but it kind of expands upon them. It makes them a little bit better. It makes certain things a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. It does a lot more than just simply copy and paste and just give it a fresh coat of paint. And personally for me, I really enjoy that. But outside of all the looks and the visual style of this game, let's talk about the gameplay, because gameplay is a really big cornerstone of the Castlevania series, and this one does it very well. While the gameplay of Super Castlevania IV is similar to the original Castlevania, there are a lot of changes that make it feel like a very different game. The platforming and boss fights are there, but Simon has a lot more freedom using the famous Vampire Killer Whip, one of the most influential weapons in all of video games. Simon can attack with his whip in 8 directions this time, including diagonal above and below when jumping. He can also latch onto grapple points to swing and hang onto in different stages. A lot of Super Castlevania IV is centered around using Simon's whip, which is honestly better to me since it's one of the trademarks of the series. I know a lot of people over the years have said that this was a bad move and makes the game feel easy, but I really disagree. The challenge is still there regardless, and cutting back on using Simon's whip would be like asking Cloud from Final Fantasy VII to avoid using his Buster Sword, or Mega Man to not really use his blaster. You get the idea. It's a defining trait of the character, so it makes sense to have it prominently used more often. Immediately, this does make the sub-weapons you pick up feel less important, but they're not completely useless in my opinion. You can still pick up hearts and use crosses, holy water, and axes just like before, but they're not completely irrelevant. Unlike the original game, there are more levels to traverse and bigger areas to platform around, so it really does feel like a complete reimagining of Castlevania. A lot of what you know is still there, but there's a lot of improvements and refreshing takes on some of the cooler aspects of the game. Isn't that what we really want from remakes and reimaginings? I really like how we get a bunch more stages than in the original game, and also the stages feel a little bit more bigger and much more dynamic and much more grand than what we've seen beforehand. I love also how we get to see even more enemies and a couple classic enemies reimagined for the 16-bit era. I think that's pretty good. There's a lot of fan service injected into here, but even so, if it was just looking at some of the original stuff that we get to see, I think overall everything about this really works out well. One thing I do want to mention is the boss fights of this game, which are pretty good for the most part, even though some of them are a little bit more on the easy side, depending on how you approach them. Towards the later portion of the game, when you start getting to Dracula's castle proper, outside of that world map that you see a lot of, you do get a boss gauntlet right before the final battle, which is pretty much just a collection of classic Castlevania bosses that you've seen in previous games, which is cool. It's a lot of fan service, but for me personally, I'm not a fan of boss gauntlets. That's just, the way that I am. Some of these bosses are a lot more tougher compared to earlier bosses in the game, which I can understand as you're getting towards the end, right before that fight with Dracula. It is pretty much a nice steady learning curve or a steady challenge curve by the time you get to that point of the game. But even so, it's great to see this fan service, with all these classic Castlevania bosses. But again, that's just me. I'm not really a fan of boss gauntlets. I would have rather had it where the bosses were kind of spread out, even if we had to get 2 bosses in the same level. The other thing I do want to mention is the final battle with Dracula, which is a little bit different compared to the previous Castlevania games. There is no giant bat transformation or giant cookie monster, as like some people say. Dracula, for the most part, stays in his vampiric form, which is, again, it looks cool. It's a lot more cinematic of a fight, but even so, it's handled in a much more different way than before. I think at the very end of the fight, when you start seeing the sunlight come in through the glass window, and you start to see Dracula burn up like that, to me, that's very cool. It adds another cinematic flair to an already great experience. So now we come to my favorite part of my Castlevania reviews, and that's the music, because I love talking about Castlevania music. It's always just, again, there's something always good to love about them, even in some of the bad ones. Looking at you, Harmony of Dissonance. But even so, let's talk about the music of Super Castlevania IV. We can't talk about a Castlevania game without discussing its music, and like its predecessors, Super Castlevania IV has a great soundtrack. There's a lot of original music here, but the standout track is Simon Belmont's theme from the first stage. It's been reused over the years as a definitive theme for Simon Belmont, which is cool, but I found it strange how some of the iconic themes from the series aren't really used until the very end. I dig the remix for Vampire Killer and Bloody Tears in 16-bit because they sound great, but I'm not sure if I like hearing them towards the end of the game instead of earlier in the game. Whether this was the best choice is personal preference, but I would have thought they'd be used in the very first few levels before we get to some of the original music. Regardless though, the music is great and gives you more tracks to listen to. Like this one right here, for example. God, I love this music, it's so damn good. I have to say it once again, I love the music of this freaking series. It just sounds so damn good. While not every musical piece in Super Castlevania IV is iconic as, let's say, Simon Belmont's theme or any of the other classic remix themes, they overall do set up a good tone and atmosphere for every single one of the stages that you end up visiting. Like I said, Simon's theme is the best theme out of the entire soundtrack. It's something that's iconic now at this point. It's been reused and recycled in many other Castlevania games after Super Castlevania IV. It just sounds very good. It sets up like this epic journey, this epic atmosphere, this epic character that we've come to know and love for so many years. And we're seeing like a brand new version of his tale play out on screen. I just feel like the music matches up to it so damn well. And even then, I have to give props to the original music that's included in here as well. I think that they all sound really good, even though compared to other Castlevania games out of the entire series' history, it's probably not as good as like some of those soundtracks. It still works well on the Super Nintendo. I know a lot of people that grew up with this game and really swear by some of the music that's included here. So after everything that I've said up to this point, can I recommend that you guys play Super Castlevania IV now these days? Unequivocally, yes. I think Super Castlevania IV holds up very damn well compared to other Castlevania games that might have not aged as gracefully as this one has. I think that the visuals look great. It's a really good jump into the 16-bit visual style on the Super Nintendo. I think the soundtrack is good. I think that you get a lot of bang for your buck, especially if you're a Castlevania fan that's been with the series since the very beginning. I think that Simon Belmont is a cool character. The way that he's interpreted in this game is a little bit better in my personal opinion compared to what we saw in Castlevania Chronicles, which is a lot more linear. In Super Castlevania IV, Simon Belmont and just the world around him have a lot more to do and a lot more to play with. If you really want a challenging game and you love the Castlevania series or games like Castlevania, I can't recommend Super Castlevania IV enough. The way that I was able to play Super Castlevania IV was part of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection that was released by Konami not too long ago. It's for the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and I believe also on the Xbox One as well. You can get it in a variety of different places. It's the best way to play this game to date. Anyway, there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts on Super Castlevania IV for the Super Nintendo. I know some of you have waited quite a while for me to review this game. It's another classic on the console, and I know that some people really swear by this game, as well as also some of the other games we've reviewed in the past before, but I really wanted to get to this one. I felt like it was time to do so. But regardless, those are just my opinions about Super Castlevania IV. Let me know what you guys think about this game in the comment section down below. Tell me, did you grow up playing Super Castlevania IV on the SNES? Do you love other Castlevania games? Do you think like this is a good remake, or even not as good as a remake as Castlevania Chronicles? Put all that stuff in the comment section down below. And of course, as always, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos just like this one. I have a lot of content I know you guys are going to love. And don't forget, I am on Patreon, guys. Make sure you check out the links in the description box down below to go directly to my Patreon page. For the dollar level or higher, you're going to get a ton of exclusive content, including early access to new videos, a whole bunch of brand new exclusive podcasts and other vlogs. There's a lot of great stuff you guys definitely need to check out. Again, links in the description box down below. Anyway, I will talk to all of you guys again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody. Thanks for watching this video, everyone. Make sure you guys check out some of these other videos in the boxes after the credits, and don't forget to visit my Patreon page via the annotations for more exclusive content. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.